your side.
Sure. Okay. I am from Garden Grove. I grew up here, a few blocks down that way. I went to undergrad at Stanford. Things that I did during undergrad included working as a Vietnamese medical interpreter at the for 4 years. I was in an Asian interest sorority for undergrad. I staffed in a dorm. I was involved in the Student Association of Stanford, so running their culture night show, running one of the regional conferences, getting involved on the national level. Other things were, I also got involved in undergraduate research, very, very basic bench research, working with yeast. So it had no application to humans directly whatsoever, but it was a really great way for me to apply things that I learned in my science classes at bench. And overall, I just think I had a very well-rounded application. My numbers were super average. Like if you looked up the average stats for people that get accepted to med school, I think mine were exactly average. And I credit most of my success to writing a really good personal statement, being really involved in my activities to the point that I spent many years in most of these activities. I didn't do them for just a summer, I didn't do them for just like a few months. These are things I devoted a lot of time and energy into, and it really shows when you write about it and you talk about it in your interview that it wasn't something that you just did just for the heck of it, right? Like, yes, I understand that med school you have this checklist, laundry list of things that you need to do, but hopefully when you get into doing it, you really feel like you want to do it for the sake of your personal growth, for the sake of helping other people out, for the sake of progressing science as a field, as opposed to simply just trying to get into medical school. I think sometimes people focus a bit too much on doing the checklist items, and I personally think it kind of comes across when you're not doing it genuinely. And let's see, other things that I thought were good. I had great letters of recommendation. I know that for a fact because the people that I chose for my letter of recommendation, I asked them, can you write me a good letter of recommendation? You know, and if you're close enough to them, they'll be upfront with you, right? And if they don't feel like they can, hopefully they will tell you, because that can be a major hindrance to your application. I don't know how it works in the admissions committee, but I imagine a terrible letter of recommendation could not help for sure.
There are a few horror stories that do happen. So whenever you ask for a letter of recommendation, you should be asking for a confidential letter of recommendation, meaning that you do not see the contents of this letter, and you've signed a waiver saying that you don't ever see what those contents are. Sometimes that's true, sometimes it's not. Depending on your letter writer, I have seen a letter writer, for instance, saying he was the best student in my class. He scored excellent on every exam. He was one of my best researchers. There was one problem with that statement. He was a she. Right. I've seen letters addressed to the wrong people before. I've seen letters that were obvious copy and paste, which frankly, when I'm reading through it, your application's like that thick, and the letter of recommendation really serves as, one, as a sanity check, two, to verify that the things that you're talking about are actually the things that you did, and to see what other people see in you, what potential do they have. I've seen fantastic letters of recommendation saying, in my 20 years of teaching at this small university, this is one of the brightest students I've ever had. They have extremely high potential to be an excellent researcher. Great, fantastic, that's good. That's what we want to hear. I've also heard things of, I'm not sure if this person is someone I would send to my own family members, but, and then it's like, ooh. So think about that, okay? And it's okay, I'd actually prefer that someone says no to you and write you a terrible letter than someone say yes. And well, yeah, I'd rather have you someone say no and write you, and not have that letter in your packet versus someone who says yes and writes you a terrible letter. So.
Just go off what Jeremiah was saying earlier. I actually didn't have any letter of recs from MDs at all. The ones I had were from a PhD researcher I worked with, the person I staffed the dorm with, my boss, people that I did random humanities things on the side with. So I was really involved with the Asian American community at Stanford, so people that I'd worked in that capacity with, and people on my study abroad trip, people I worked with there. And so I think as long as you're able to make the most of each opportunity, any of your interests, and make a really meaningful connection with the person in charge of the program, try to keep that connection. Try to maintain it, even after you've graduated from undergrad. Try to be friends with them, send them update emails, check in with them, drop by in person. Because these are people too, right? They're people that have a lot of power and can help write you a good letter, but hopefully they're also people that you look up to, and that will come across to them. They'll want to advocate for you accordingly. So letters of rec. Yes, question.
I was wondering because, like, let's say I had the opportunity to only send a certain number of letter of recs, and like I had one where it would be from an MD. Let's say I shadow, and he would maybe say that he would recommend me, and the letter of rec is maybe like a 6 out of 10. It's good, but it's not like that good. But then I had an astro professor, or like astronomy professor, and like he doesn't have anything to do with, you know, medicine or anything, but he just writes this long thing of like of all these things of like how he's the brightest guy, nicest person, very like all that. Like, what would you prefer you to say?
I'm not on the admissions committee yet, but I would prefer personally the astro.
So
It depends, because nothing.
Yeah,
It's never
it
gonna be that
really
black and
depends
white, right?
once again, the context of the letter.
Yeah.
I don't really have a huge preference for MDs personally. It's very subjective at this point, meaning if the person who's looking at what their priorities are in terms of looking at letters of rec. My letters I sent, I had one MD who was a sportsman professor. I had one PhD. I think I had another MD who was like someone I did Taekwondo with, who was an anesthesiologist, but he was really cool and we spent a lot of time together. And in the end, I think I only had 4 or 5 letters, right? Versus 12, which is a huge number.
Sorry.
Actually, that's like a new record, right? But the point is that you meet the 3 criteria of, I think it was 2 science letters, 1 non-science letter. You want at least 3. So I had my 2 science letters. I had one from a public health professor, which is technically a non-science letter. You want to talk about quality, right?
Yeah.
I really don't care about what the statistic was in your class. You could have been the top 1th percentile out of 3, or technically top 30th percentile out of 3. And I don't have any real context for who your professors are. I've seen letters from community MDs who have no academic affiliation, who write fantastic personalized letters, like this person saw one of my sickest patients, or they helped out in clinic and they had a great presence. And I don't know who this guy is, whatever, you know, versus the dean of you know, the chair of the family medicine department of the local medical school. I'm like, oh, cool. Like, what does this person have to say about them? And sometimes it's nothing. So, once again, it's just the overall quality. And this is the hard part is, what tone does that set inside of your application? In the context of reading your application, because I've seen this person would be a great clinician, and their whole application was about research. So.
My mantra in life is do it once, do it right. So ideally, take the MCAT once. Ideally, apply for med school once. Don't be afraid that you have to retake it or have to reapply. That's a reality that a lot of people have to go through. But you want to prepare yourself to the point where it's like, this is it. You don't want to anything. Like, you have to try to put your best foot forward in every situation. And for the MCAT, that means only take it once you feel like you have had enough time to study for it adequately. And for some people, that might include test prep courses. Only apply for med school if you've gotten all your letters of rec in by like April, and if you have your transcripts ready to go and you are on the way to writing your personal statement. Because I've had good friends who have amazing scores, amazing experiences, they apply late, and they don't get in anywhere. And that's unfortunate because medical school applications are, like Dave said, I think not complete crapshoot, but relative crapshoot. And if you know how to kind of play the game in terms of getting your foot in the door early, getting those interview slots early, that will benefit you greatly over the course of the entire application cycle. And
what do you consider late?
So I thought I submitted a little bit late. I submitted July 2nd, and applications open up June 1st.
Yeah, June 1st.
Yeah.
It's kind of in the middle.
Yeah, so I would say definitely before July 4th. That's like your...
Apply on June 1st if you're that knockout applicant and you're sure you're going to Harvard, I would say.
Yeah.
Because those are the people who like, they've had everything ready for like the last year, and they're just waiting for their next research paper to get published, and they're good to go.
Yeah.
Okay. Because those are the ones who, and because in the beginning, if you're on the committee, it's really easy just to be like, well, I still have 499 seats left. I don't like this guy. Next, I don't really like this guy. Ooh, this is a good application. Let's interview him. Versus when you have 25 seats left, and you're like, well, I kind of like this applicant, but this one has better scores, and so you start, sitting there and kind of poking back and forth. Now, the caveat of that is if you're at the very end of the cycle, there's only 20 seats left, and they're sitting in a stack of 400 applications. So you have to be, if your scores are somewhere in the middle, you should probably apply somewhere in the middle. So August is way too late. July is like mid-June through end of July is reasonable. End of July, you're really pushing it. Secondaries, don't do what I did. I submitted all of my secondaries in like December. My friends who that was a stupid move. It was a really bad move, but I still got it. But what I'm saying is don't make that mistake, because I know people who were done with primaries, done with secondaries by end of July.
I think that's like the best advice that I think this whole thing, because I know people, actually my husband, who got 36 on his MCAT, he has a good research experience, full GPA, have amazing background, applied in August, wait for his secondary until it's due, submitted it, and he got 2 interviews, and they're like, we loved you, but we already filled. It's a it's a rolling process, so it's actually, you have to get on it immediately. Like June 1st, if you have everything in, submit it. First secondary, return it right away, and you can prepare for most of these secondaries, actually. There's a list of questions. As soon as you get your primary in, prepare for the secondary.
And where I made my mistake was I kept trying to perfect that secondary. I was like, I'm so close. It's just, I have to squeeze in this last sentence and edit it one more time, and then, weeks would take by. A lot of the applications will have really similar questions, and eventually you'll just start copying and pasting and making sure you didn't make too many awful changes. The secondary is about getting in on time and making sure your statement is clear at that point. Yeah, December, August, way too late. Also, all the schools will go on break in December, which means that your application is sitting there for like a month. Meanwhile, all these other applications for all the other late people are also rolling in behind you, and now you're in line with all these people in February. That was probably the saddest 2 months of my life. Nothing, radio silence for 2 months. So don't do that. You don't want to be in that position.
That being said, don't submit a subpar application either. Things with lots of typos, no, don't do that. Things that aren't coherent and don't make sense, those are also going to work against your favor. So, like Dr. Han was saying, a lot of these things you can prepare in advance. There are forums online where they'll post secondary questions. You can go online and figure out what the secondaries are. Most schools keep them the same. And like Dave was saying, they're generally recycled every year. Every school has some recreation of why do you want to be a doctor, like what was your weakness, what was your strength. So things like that you can definitely prepare for.
And some of these schools will have social media websites. University of Michigan, I think, has a Twitter website. And their Twitter account, I paid like $150 for the secondary. I submitted it, and then it popped up on my Twitter feed like 3 hours later. Sorry, we filled all of our out-of-state applications. Go $200 gone. So keep in mind, you might have other sources of information. And it's like, oh god, why did I spend a week on that? That was the stupidest thing I could have done. So really, when the secondaries come in, you want to start working on those right away.
So the general rule of thumb that I've been told was within 2 weeks of getting the secondary, you have to submit it.
Yeah.
And get people to read it. That's usually the easiest. A sanity check, B, grammar check, and does it make sense check.
Yeah, because you're going to read it like 20 times over.
Yeah, it gets really mind-numbing sometimes reading the same words that you wrote, but copying and pasting in different kind of sequences. So have someone read it to make sure that it sounds okay. Okay, other things are, so freshman year, definitely try to hit the ground running, doing well. I'm sure you guys are already all past freshman year or in freshman year, so beyond that point now. Once you have that solid foundation, try not to do too many things in the academic realm, and don't overload yourself with really difficult classes. My advice actually is to get involved with volunteer things earlier if you can, aka your freshman year, because it just helps provide continuity of experience. It helps you get to meet people earlier, form connections, and really build your foundation in these organizations so that you can get leadership positions easier. But grades are really important too.